As usual, we'll first practice to collect the mind, concentrate the mind, focusing only on the breath. And then we'll open up the attention to the whole body. And you don't talk. If you close the door, I think the sound is coming from adjoining room.
Yes, sir. The door is closed. Actually, the teacher is taking the class with a mic. So it's a big batch. So I think she has to use a mic. That's why it's coming. We can ask her to lower the volume a bit.
That's okay. Leave it.
So we can mute from our side, right? But, हमें
You can now begin to let the awareness of the breath go in the background and bring to foreground awareness of the body. So both are being known. When the breath is stopped, we are focusing entirely on the body, bodily sensations and feelings. And when breath is comes in the forefront, then you put attention on the breath and see whether we can simultaneously feel what is happening in the body along with the breath. Okay. while doing the mindfulness of breathing. When the mind wanders away, we relax and let it come back. But in the insight meditation, when mind wanders away, we know the mind has wandered away. And we adopt a posture of, I know it is impermanent and it will cease. Let me not interfere with it and see its arising and passing away. So that strengthens our sense of non-self. It's very, very important that we practice properly. Mere practice, not done properly, doesn't produce good fruit. So do it for a few more minutes. And also try to feel that when you are seeing the breath going in, are you able to simultaneously feel as if the breath going in is causing the bodily sensations to move down or up? And similarly, when the breath comes out, the reverse takes place. So see whether you can note it. It's helpful, but it's not mandatory. Try it out. Okay, so you can open your eyes. You can quick open the eyes and we'll start the discussion soon. In the last class, we started discussion on Abhidhamma, and we discussed what is the distinctive feature of Abhidhamma. It's like a microscopic analysis of the mental phenomena of the mind. And we define the ultimate realities, the building block of experience as Paramatha Dhamma, or the ultimate realities, analogy with the modern science. And we studied some elements of Dhamma theory, and then we came to the various mental factors. These 52 mental factors are identified, some wholesome, some unwholesome, some universal, which are always present, others which are occasional. And it is these mental factors which make us dance to the tunes of the surrounding world. Then we saw there are some details of these factors. There is a typical basic elemental chitta we studied, 7 universal ethically variable factors, and the consciousness, sense consciousness. But we also saw that by mixing of other mental factors, they can be further subdivided into 89 or 121 types of mental states. Some of them wholesome, some unwholesome, and some rootless. Rootless meaning neither wholesome roots they have nor unwholesome roots. They are usually the result of past karma. They are the result of past karma. There are also rootless, which are functional chittas, which have certain defined function in the process of relationship with the world. So we'll start today the very important discussion on cognition. You are able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, are we audible?
Yeah, I can hear you, but sometimes you switch off the mic and
Yes, sir. There was
Mhm.
disturbance from outside. Now we've asked ma'am to turn down the volume.
Okay, thank you. Now, cognition prima facie seems as if our eye is seeing an object and seeing happens, isn't it? Ear is hearing sound and hearing happens. It seems to be an instantaneous phenomena. But if we have the ability to perceive mental phenomena at a microscopic level, we recognize that this is not the case. It's not an immediate result of contact between sense organ and sense object. There's a series of cumulative number of events which happen. The process begins from a simple sensory contact and gradually it proceeds to the complete apprehension of the object, whether it is visual object, auditory object, olfactory object, or whatever. And once again, we recognize there is no person who is doing all that. There is no self or subject behind the cognitive process as an enduring entity which is experiencing the object or is directing the various mental activities. All this is happening naturally according to principles of psychological order, which is Chitta Niyama, the law of the mind. And each stage in the continuum is conditioned by the immediately preceding state. So there is a series of mental steps involved in completion of a cognition process. So we therefore study this cognition in some detail because of its importance in understanding some of the crucial questions related to the teachings of the Buddha. One, for example, question is what happens in deep sleep when there is no sense consciousness? We define sense consciousness as arising based on the sense object and the sense base. And the person is awake. There is an attention faculty. But when one is in deep sleep, obviously there will be no sense consciousness. So if there's no sense consciousness, is the person dead? Obviously not. So the Abhidhamma explains it as some kind of a life continuum, what's called a bhavanga chitta. Its function is to maintain continuity of mental stream by arising and passing away continuously during the interval between two consecutive cognitive processes. So during deep sleep, when there is no cognitive process happening, the bhavanga chitta takes over. And what is this bhavanga chitta of life continuum? It is it is the consciousness which arises immediately after the first vijnana. You remember in the Paticca Samutpad we had said avidya pachya sankhara, sankhara pachya vijnana. And in the three life model we had said the sankhara which arises at the last mind moment before death, that gives rise to the new vijnana. And that finds its place in new body because the old body has died. So the new body takes up the new vijnana. And that's what we had called patisandhi vijnana, relinking consciousness, which links the stream of consciousness, keeps its continuity. So soon after the first vijnana, the relinking vijnana arises and passes away, then arises the bhavanga chitta, which is the result of the next mind moment of the next new life. And that bhavanga chitta contains all the characteristics of the vijnana. So it contains all the sankharas, all the habit patterns, all the memories. They are there in the potential form. And this remains constant throughout the life stream. It doesn't change. So throughout the life, the particular bhavanga chitta operates. Now, human beings, a person is born as a human being when the vijnana and the sankhara at the previous life was a wholesome one. And then the new vijnana will also be a wholesome one. How strongly wholesome, it can vary. And it may carry some unwholesomeness also depending on karma, which is carried on along. But to get a human birth is seen to be a very auspicious thing to happen, which means at that particular moment of the death, a very wholesome sankhara arose. Therefore, the bhavanga chitta generally is a wholesome bhavanga chitta, which means when there is no conscious activity of the mind, we are in deep sleep, the bhavanga chitta is a wholesome chitta, which is arising and passing away at a very rapid rate, which we can't really decipher. It's almost like a continuous stream, but it is wholesome, and therefore the effect of it is it has a pleasant feeling associated with that. That's why in deep sleep we get a pleasant feeling, and then we feel refreshed because the state of the mind during deep sleep is the wholesome state. During a waking state, of course, the states can be wholesome and unwholesome depending on what we do with it. But otherwise, therefore, the bhavanga chitta, this explains what happens in the deep sleep. So in the deep sleep, there is a bhavanga chitta, the life continuum, ceaselessly operating, arising and passing away, arising and passing away. And then what happens in the process, the consciousness, when the cognition process, whenever there is an impact at a sense door, the cognitive process begins. Okay. So imagine, and then a typical cognitive process completes in 17 mind moments, which is exactly equal to one mitral movement. What does it mean? That the arising and passing away of material phenomena takes place at a slower rate than the mental phenomena. So in the time in which a mental phenomena arises and passes away, in that time moment, 17 mind moments arise. And that's based on the direct experience of the Dhamma masters who actually propounded all this Dhamma theory. So it is shown in terms of, and those 17 mind moments are all unique. They have different purposes, different characteristics. And to understand that, I've drawn a small diagram here. The sensory consciousness, for example, of hearing. What happens when we hear something? Imagine somebody is sleeping deep asleep and there is a very strong noise produced. So when a person is in deep sleep, there is a bhavanga stream. BS stand, the bhavanga stream is already operating constantly. The past bhavanga, which is it's going on. Now there is a disturbance. At this point, a disturbance occurs. So the bhavanga chitta gets disturbed. It's termed typically as chalana, but the real translation approximate will be vibrating. That is it. Mind streets get disturbed. And then if the impact is very strong, there's a condition there. If the impact is very strong, then it may get arrested, which means the bhavanga chitta stops. And then a new series, the process begins. The process consciousness begins to happen. So what is the first chitta which arises? First consciousness which arises is called five-door adverting consciousness. Okay, FDA. I'll put symbols first to make it possible to write down. So as I've written below, you can see FDA is five-door adverting consciousness. What does it mean, five-door? We have five senses. And those five senses will have impact from surroundings. And so the first thing, whenever there is any disturbance of the bhavanga chitta, the first chitta which arises is a five-door adverting consciousness, which is a functional chitta. Means it's a basic inbuilt characteristic of human beings that this five-door adverting consciousness arises. Whenever the bhavanga chitta is disturbed, that chitta arises as if it's making an inquiry. Hey, what's going on? What has happened? Some disturbance has arisen. And so it finds out, oh, disturbance is at the ear door. For example, if there is noise. So it knows disturbance at the ear door, and then ear consciousness will begin to arise. So the next after that will be, after this will be the ear consciousness. If, for example, you are sitting quietly and say you're sleeping deeply, okay, and a very strong light is thrown on you. You know, some stroboscopic light is thrown on the eyes. Then the disturbance will register, FDA will register, oh, something is happening at the visual consciousness. So the visual consciousness will arise and see what's going on. Or some extreme smell is coming when you're asleep. Then the consciousness associated with nose will arise. Now, this is not only deep sleep. In between our process events also, there are moments of bhavanga chitta. So even when, say, for example, you're sitting quietly and you're studying something and a very strong sound arises, then that consciousness which is associated with studying is disturbed. And then depending on the disturbance and depending on your mind's attention, ability, it may get disturbed and another process may start. Okay. So here we are considering hearing. So the ear consciousness will arise. EC stands for ear consciousness. And then it is just a mind movement, which means it knows, yeah, some sound is coming. But it's not still registered fully. It's not being able to figure out what is it, who is speaking, what is the tone of the voice, and it does not recognize what the voice is. There's just impact of a sound on the ear. And then there are this small mind movements, what's called receiving chitta, investigating chitta, determining chitta. These three chittas, these three mind movements, some information is gathered about what kind of sound is it. Okay. And then when then some basic information is gathered, then if the sound is persisting, sufficiently strong, then what are called these 7 mind moments of Javana Chitta happen. JA, what's called Javana Chitta, which means this is the Chitta which is running across the sensory input. So the sensory input is being now thoroughly analyzed. What's going on? So they're all mind consciousnesses. They're all mental consciousnesses. So it's being analyzed. Oh, this sound is coming. And then what will analysis mean? Comparison with the past memories, with the sanya. And then depending on what are the latent tendencies, there'll be response to them. So within silent mind moments, the complete response and recognition of that begins, is reasonably done. And then there is the 2 mind moments of registering chitta, which means you actually register in the memory, oh, this is what it is. And then the cognitive process is complete here. And then again, the bhavanga stream starts. If that sound is finished, then the bhavanga stream starts. And again, as it keeps on, so we start from here, bhavanga stream. Again, then there may be a visual or a smell or any other object, and then the processes keep on happening. So this is how the in-depth analysis of a typical cognitive process is done. 17 mind movements. Of course, all these 17 mind movements may happen or not happen depending on intensity of the impact. How strong is the object? If the object is very mild, of course, it may not even be able to arrest the bhavangas. Bhavanga may continue. No? So suppose you're sleeping and somebody is talking, you may not register it. It doesn't matter if you're really sleeping and not pretending. Then people may talk, you don't know. They may be criticizing you, you have no idea what's going on. So then what it means is, even though this ear is there functional, sound is coming, but there is no attention to that, and therefore the bhavanga stream is not getting disturbed. The bhavanga stream keeps on going on. If it is strong enough to arouse, then the process may go on here. But if it is not sufficiently strong to last, all the process may not happen. It may start, it may 5-door adverting may happen, ear consciousness may arise, these may arise, and this may not arise because the impact is not very strong. So only when the impact is very strong, then it gets registered. Then this analysis happens, and if it doesn't happen up to entire 17, then registration may not happen. And it's a common phenomenon. We are not registering what is senses are, what is impacting on the senses. One of the common ways in which this is to do what's called the mindfulness. If the registration happens, then it means you are really mindful. You are waiting and seeing phenomena. Otherwise, you will not remember what happened. As if, for example, if I ask you, what did you eat? What were you eating short while ago? And was it tasty or not? What are the details of that? You may not remember it unless it was really registered in you. And one of the typical methods of Zen monks to check the mindfulness of their young disciples would be, they come and enter the hall and they will ask you, Why did you keep your shoe when you entered the hall? And he would say, I kept it on the right side or left side. Yeah, he'll try to remember. Then I'll ask him what was the shoe adjacent to that? Sorry, I don't know. Because there is visual consciousness. You've seen them, but it didn't register. This is what happens when you say, I don't know, you might not have experienced it many times, Uh, I keep a speck somewhere and forget it because I'm not mindful in where I've kept it. And then I'll search for it all over the world. Why? Because the registration has not happened. So these are the important aspects which these Abhidhamma masters recognized how the process of cognition happens. Does it sound too complex? Is it okay? Any questions on that?
Sir, could you please explain again what is meant by Bhavanga stream?
It means the stream, Bhava means becoming. Bhavanga means a factor of becoming. It means something which existence. Bhava also means existence. So it is the stream of existence. So it is the stream of consciousness which flows when there is no input from outside world. When we are not interacting with the outside world. This may happen in deep sleep. This will happen between various cognitive processes, with a gap between various cognitive processes. It was very short, 1 minute, 1 second, 10 seconds. When one cognitive process is over, say you are hearing something and that sound and vanished. So for some time there is silence. So when you say there is silence, then there is no, eyes are closed, you're not hearing anything, not smelling, not tasting, then during that time what is happening? It reverts back to the Bhavanga stream. The registration of the sound ended and Bhavanga stream starts. So it is the basic, you can say the unconscious, in the modern psychology, you could call it the modern unconscious part of the mind, which keeps on always being there. And it's not something which is very pure, as some other tradition would like to tell you. It is the result of past. The first is, it is the vipaka of the very first chitta of the present life. You remember the paticca samutpada, we had said avidya pachya sankhara, sankhara pachya avinyana. You remember or forgotten permanently? Let me see if I can trace that.
Past actions of it.
That's the two interpretations of paticca samutpada, three life formulation and moment to moment formulation. And what is the three life formulation in this diagram? There is avidya, ignorance. It gives rise to sankhara, mental volition formations, and that gives rise to the new vijnana. So these two are the aspects of the past life. This is the relinking consciousness in the new life. And after the relinking consciousness, it is a phenomena which happens mind moment by mind moment. The next consciousness after Vijnana will be Bhavanga Chitta. So it will have all the attributes of the first Vijnana of the present life, which is a wholesome mind state for all human beings. So the first Vijnana, which first consciousness which arises after the Patisandhi Vijnana at the moment of our birth in this life, that is called the Bhavanga Chitta, which continues to operate till such time as there is a disturbance on any of the sense doors. Okay, so that is the, or you can see with respect to this diagram, these are the past causes. Avidya, ignorance gives rise to volitional impulse. These are the past causes. This is the present result. Consciousness is the result. Body and mind are the result. Sense bases are the result. Contact is the result. Feeling is the result. So the between consciousness, this is at a gross level we are talking. Consciousness giving rise to body and mind. But there is a finer subdivision of that. That consciousness impacting body and mind. Immediately after this arising of first consciousness, there will be Bhavanga Chitta. And that will, of course, continue and keep on impacting the further growth of the organism within the womb. So this is the Bhavanga Chitta, which operates, which is formed here immediately after the first consciousness of the present birth. So Bhava means the existence or the becoming, the cycle of becoming. So Bhavanga Chitta means the cycle which keeps the cycle on, which keeps us around in the existence. Okay. Yeah. Now, what else?
As you gave this example of hearing when one is in deep sleep, so the differences that we see across people, that the same amount of sound might end up waking someone and might not wake someone else up. So it is because there's difference in bhavanga stream at the very beginning or somewhere in the process.
Now, there are deeper questions than that, which will, I think, explain it. Firstly, I have said these, if you see these color, I've shown it in color also, just to highlight. These 5 doors, higher consciousness, receiving chitta, investigating chitta, determining chitta, then registering chitta. They're all rootless chittas, which meaning they are either functional or the result of past karma. So the ones which I put in yellow, they are functional chitta. Yellow highlight is rootless functional chitta. So these two are functional chittas. This is an inherent capability of the mind that whenever there is a disturbance, it finds out what's going on. And whenever there is some cognition beginning, it tries to determine what's it. But then the rest of all are, you can see these are all red color words, these are all rootless vipaka chitta. Rootless meaning they don't have any strength, but they are vipaka. Vipaka means the result of karma. So all your sensory consciousness is a result of karma. Now this has deep implications. What implications do you think it has? When I say that the sensory consciousnesses which we have, or the sensory abilities to see, hear, taste, touch, they're all a result of past karma, according to this Abhidhamma philosophy. The Abhidhamma master, it's not really philosophy, it's something which they saw, and they just put it for us to verify. So when you see people with differing abilities or some handicaps in terms of various sense organs, according to Abhidhamma, it's all a result of past karma. It's very difficult for modern psychology and modern, what should I call it, woke culture to accept such kind of a thing. It looks pretty elitist. But that's a law of nature. Elitist or socialistic or capitalistic or whatever you call it, doesn't matter. That's the way it works. The receiving chitta, the investigating chitta, they're all past karma driven. Some people have the ability to investigate, some have much lesser ability. And it doesn't stop there. It has even deeper implications. Now, something which may be absolutely mind-boggling. Now, these consciousnesses have associated mental factors, wholesome, unwholesome. They are called, vipak chittas are called the result of wholesome karma or result of unwholesome karma. Means actions which have been done in the past life with good intentions, let me put it in a colloquial language, and actions which have not been done with good intentions. Actions which have been motivated by greed, hatred, and delusion, or they are unwholesome motivations. And actions which have been motivated by generosity, kindness, wisdom, they are wholesome intentions. So, associated with those consciousnesses which are wholesome will be a pleasant feeling. Associated with those consciousnesses which are unwholesome, there will be an unpleasant feeling. Now, how does it translate into vipaka chitta? That vipaka chitta will be associated with wholesome or unwholesome feeling. What does it mean eventually? That what I see in my life, what I hear in my life, whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, is governed by my karma. This again would be very difficult for Western psychologists or even Indian psychology to accept with all its connotations of equality and genetic issues and social issues driving inequality. So if I am having unpleasant experiences in my life, unpleasant sights, unpleasant sounds, they are indicative of unwholesome vipaka chitta, which means they are the result of unwholesome karma of the past. It could be past within this life or past life. It's not necessarily past life. Within this life itself, if I have lived long enough, then may I have done some things which fructify now? No. So let's think about that. What does it really mean? Okay. Any other comment or question?
So I have a question.
Anji,
Um, so you're of course right in saying that the woke mind does not want to accept the fact that I am responsible for whatever has happened with me, so to say. Yeah, if I'm really like making it very simple, but also when today, if if I actually even accept it, um, and then I try to work from there, um, is it again not going into the unwholesome thing? Because maybe now I'm motivated by fear of what I've already done in the past, and then what I will do now further. So I'm always being conscious of what I'm going to do because of the fear of, oh, I shouldn't do something bad, otherwise something bad will happen.
That's very good, no? Don't you think it's very good to have a fear of unwholesome actions?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I want to. I mean, I not want to do something unwholesome because I just don't want to do it. Not out of the fear of, oh, if I don't do it, if I do it, then something bad will befall me. Because there is, I feel corrupt. I don't know.
Why should anybody not do? Let me put it clearly. If there is no fear of, put it in a very kind of conventional word sense. Okay. If there is no fear of um, corruption being of doing corruption, why would anybody not do it? It's so pleasant to get money. It's only fear that corruption will lead me to jail and all kinds of consequences that we have some semblance of an order in the world. So if you remember, I had mentioned about wholesome qualities. What are the wholesome qualities? Let me again go back. Okay. Universal wholesome qualities. These are the mental factors. Shraddha, which means faith, and Sati, mindfulness, Hiri, moral shame, Utappa, moral dread. These are recognized as wholesome mental qualities. Moral shame and moral dread, which means shame at breaking the ethical precepts, and fear of breaking the precepts. So shame and fear are not unwholesome always. At least this is what Abhidhamma teaches, and you can deeply reflect upon it. The modern concept of Freudian concepts, do whatever you like and allow everything to express, otherwise you'll be suppressing yourself. It's not really I think people have understood the limitations of that thought process. So restraint of senses is a wholesome thing. You have to recognize that. Otherwise, we are driven by hedonistic tendency. That is our intrinsic tendency of all the beings born in the sense plane. Human beings, animals, and the first few levels of the heavenly realms, they're all sensitive, called kama vachara loka, which means the realms of sense pleasures. So we're all servants of sense pleasures, slaves to sense pleasures. We're born in that realm because of that tendencies, intrinsic tendency of that kind. And if there is no check, it can easily degenerate into breaking of all the precepts. What are the precepts? Preventing killing, theft, sexual misconduct, telling lies, intoxication. No, there is a joy in intoxication. There's a joy in sexual misconduct. One can take joy if there is no restraint. There's a joy in taking revenge from people. There's some kind of a kick we get in each of them, isn't it? So if you look at ourselves carefully, you realize that the precepts are self-imposed restrictions. Why? Because breaking of precepts increases suffering. It's not that I will be harmed or something. I'll suffer immediately. You can try it out. Especially if you're practicing mindfulness, you'll know like this. You tell a lie and there will be some agitation in the mind. Oh my God, what happens if she finds out, if he finds out? You break a do sexual misconduct, and you'll be in deep trouble. You'll not be able to rest in peace. That's the intrinsic quality of mindfulness, of the heart's purity, trying to prevent unwholesome things from arising. And that's why the moral shame and moral dread are given importance. Cultivate them so that we don't get into that direction at all. They act as the initial barriers to prevent our spiritual destruction, to getting caught in the cycle of birth and death again and again and again. So if you want to progress, which in more simple terms, I would say, if you want to improve your mental well-being, these are the universal qualities which are needed. Mindfulness, having some faith in the good qualities. Faith in what? Faith in good qualities. Faith in precepts. Faith in the enlightenment of enlightened beings. Mindfulness, moral shame, moral dread, absence of greed, absence of hatred. These are all good qualities. Why they are good? Not because Buddha said so. Because when I imbibe those, they give me joy. I can experience them. We're not following good and bad because somebody tells us. It's direct experience of ours. Okay. Do you agree, Ashika? What do you think?
I definitely agree with it. But I also think that that I was asking the question more so in silo, that if I'm just driven by fear, then of course it'll be corrupt. But I'm also looking at all the other factors now and thinking that it has to all come together, right? Because if I'm also mindful of how I'm acting, then of course at some point of time, if I'm only acting out of that sense that, oh, I should act always this way so that I don't get into trouble, then I'll be able to catch that as well. So
You're thinking of it theoretically. That's the problem.
yeah, yeah,
It's not theory, it's practice. I know it from my experience that if I don't allow sense restraint, I suffer. So it's not a fear, it's an experience. I can do it few times, no problem. You can break precepts a few times and see for yourself, then you'll remember. I'm sure we all must have broken at least the precept of telling lies. How many of us can claim we have been 100% truthful throughout our life? We must have broken it, and we can immediately recover what happened. Right? When as a child, I told my mom something which was untrue, and how much I suffered. No, it's a question of being able to recall and see, remember it, and being truthful to oneself.
right.
And as an experiment, one can do it again and see.
Right. In fact, the very same example comes to mind. There was a time when I lied to my mom about some marks I got, and I couldn't sleep. So, and I was mumbling in my sleep something, and the next day my mom asked me about my marks, and I was like, "How do you know?" And then she said, "Because you were mumbling in your sleep." So, so yeah, it does come to mind, the same example.
So the truth comes out unknowingly.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not a question of being a fear or fear as a negative mental factor or shame. You know, the it's not the fear and shame in the same sense as a as is normally understood in the society, especially in the Western society, who want us to be fearless and shameless. The issue is of our own experience. That I know that if I do something which is breaking it is moral shame. It's not other shame of doing some dressing like this or eating like that. That's not the issue. It's the shame of breaking the precepts, being ashamed of doing that, being ashamed of not living up to our full potential. You can put it like that. Not exercising our own wisdom. So when you look at it in that manner, then it becomes evident. It is a experiential fact. Okay. Any other question?
No, sir,
No,
not.
no? Okay, we can go ahead then. Now, all this again brings us back to that very question, which is fundamentally to the teachings of the Buddha, it is the notion of self. The first point I've written here is what are the implications of sensory consciousness being vipaka chitta. So it's very difficult for Western psychology to accept it. We all admit it's not understood like that. We always think the conditions we face are because of society. In apparent truth is that is apparent truth, of course. So as I have written it in some paper also, the COVID is an apparent truth which we faced, and we will say, "Yeah, I didn't deserve it." Those people in that laboratory, or these people, because of them, this pandemic has spread all over the world, and they are the ones who are really responsible. Yeah, apparently this is true. This is the conventional truth. There's some deeper truth also. There's also a conventional truth that people who took precaution, they didn't get it so easily, and then so on and on. But it's not so always, we know that. All the myths of health and all the myths of treatment were broken in the COVID period. My best friend was 100 times healthier than me, just died like that. Young people died, supposedly having good immune system, good strength, good physical strength, robust health. They didn't survive. Old people with broken teeth and gone hand, they survived. You can't really, life and death issues and things of that kind are not entirely explicable and only on the basis of external reality. There is something else also which is operating. So that's one thing. Then we again come to the same issue, because out of the 5 aggregates which we have discussed already, body, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. It is the consciousness which is the strongest binding. One can intellectually understand, yeah, body, of course, is changing. I can see my photograph of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and say, of course, body is changing. So it can't be me. Body is obviously not me. It's constantly changing. I am there anyway. Feelings are also constantly changing. If one is perceptible enough, one is investigative enough, he can easily see that they are changing. With perception, it's still more difficult, but there also one can understand. I used to think so highly about this person 20 years ago. Now, after more data came, I know this person was really not as high a person as I used to think. So we always keep on reevaluating about people, about situations in the light of newer and newer evidence. So the perceptions change. Our habit patterns change. You know that. All of you must have noticed. But the fact that I am the seer, this does not seem to change. I am the seer, of course. My eyesight might have changed, but I am the seer. I am the hearer. Now, this analysis shows you, these things show you where are you in this whole diagram. It's all happening naturally according to laws of nature. Chitta niyamas. Niyam hai chitta ka. psychological rules of cognitive processes. Where are you in this whole process? Who is knowing and producing a reaction to the external impact? You're nowhere there. It's all happening according to the character of the chitta stream. Latent tendencies are operating in this period. This is all past results, and these are the present effects, which are further governed by latent tendencies. You're nowhere there. It's all happening automatically. So the cognition process also, the biggest stumbling block is also seen to be a conditioned phenomena. There's no one who is seeing it. So we therefore come to the same conclusion that there is phenomena changing from moment to moment according to laws of cause and effect. Conditionality. Of course, in conventional sense, you can say there is a continuity, and that continuity is maintained through bhavanga. There is a continuity because of the causal independence of the aggregates. There's no kind of randomness. Suddenly something happens. One mind movement affects another, this affects another, this affects another, and so on. The conditionality as explained in dependent origination. So there is even more subtler explanation. What exactly is that conditionality? So I don't want to get into that, but that will make it explosive and be very difficult for you to appreciate that. But one thing is clear, that these are interdependent and there's no abiding essence. There's no person. So what you call as a being is more like a process than a fixed being. Continuously changes are happening. You see the body, it's probably the biggest, most complicated factory in the world. See, look at the body purely from a physical point of view. We violate the body so much, eat all kinds of junk, drink all kinds of junk, think all kinds of junkish thoughts, and still body keeps on operating. It maintains our blood sugar, it maintains the creatinine level, it maintains sodium, it maintains electrolytes, everything, cost temperature, body temperature. You can't get a thermostat as good as the body. In any thermostat, 2 to 4 degrees, 2 plus 2 minus 2 degrees is very common. And if our body goes plus minus 2 degrees, we'll be on bed. Oxygen level, during COVID, how much of time we spent our time seeing oxygen level? How does the body maintain it constantly? All the electrolyte balance, it's all complex mechanism. Automatic machine operating at its best. So there's no being there. It's all a processes constantly happening. Air entering, food entering, water entering, excretions of all kinds, sweat and urine and feces and all kinds of things. Continuously open system. There's no being there. It's all a process. And same is true of every other mental fact of all other khandas. So the more we understand it, lesser we attribute a being to this psychophysical organism. And this, from the self notion, comes to an understanding of well-being. So, of course, these examples we already discussed. Just as with the assemblage of parts, the word chariot is used, you could say word car is used. So when the aggregates exist, there is a convention, a being, it's just a convention. And the real problem is, we mistake this convention for a reality. And that is the fundamental delusion which leads to mental stress. Why? Once I am an individual, there is I, there is me, there is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. This is not yours, you are different, I am different, and there will be boundaries drawn. and there will be conflicts. And the whole task of meditation and Buddha's teachings is to uncover these unconscious conceptions of self, the fundamental cravings, and to expose them as fantasies, and thereby dispelling ignorance and revealing the imagined nature of self. This is the quotation I've taken from the Mark Epstein's book, who is a psychotherapist. I'll show you the title of the book is quite interesting. See this.
Thoughts without a thinker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see how will a normal person react to that. There's another Zen teacher and a professor of psychology. This is what he has to say about how the sense of self is arising and how you get into the illusion of it. Okay. He says contemporary psychology is also beginning to realize that sense of self is a psychological, social, linguistic construct. Psychological because the ego self is a product of mental conditioning. There's no reality in it. It is social because it develops in relation with other constructed selves. I am a being, so you are a being. This is a thing, being, this is a thing, and so on. And then linguistic because of the problems of grammar. Because this is acquiring a sense of self involving learning to use certain names and pronouns, such as I, me, mine, myself. And that creates the illusion that there must be something which is being referred to. There must be something called I, something called you. And how does he explain it? If the word cup refers to this thing which I am holding in my hand and drinking coffee out of, then you mistakenly infer that I must refer to someone in the same way. Now, why we are stressing on this? Because this is the fundamental delusion which is responsible for suffering. The stronger the delusion of I, sense of self, greater the suffering. Everything else follows from there. The greed arises with respect to I. Hatred arises with respect to others. Of course, when mentally unbalanced, it may arise with respect to so-called I also, because you see it as a different being. And as one of our teachers points out, an infant is not born with any sense of identity. And it's now developmental psychologists agree on that fact, that the sense of I in an infant develops after 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And how does it develop? Because their parents in the society continuously infuses that sense of self in him or her. You are a good boy. You are a girl. Girls behave like that. Boys behave like this. We are Hindus. We are Christians. Hindus are like that. Christians are like that. This is the way we dress. This is the way they dress. This is our caste. This is their caste. We are all Indians. They are Pakistani. They are this. So we create identities. They are good for conventional purposes, but we take them as real. The parents themselves take them as real. The society itself takes it as real. So there's no way that the child will think it is a convention. And slowly, the child begins to identify with it. And that's how this sense of I is constructed. It's a construct. So if you really recognize this as the cause of suffering, the solution to that arises from there itself. To deconstruct that notion of I. And the whole practice of meditation taught by the Buddha is ultimately aimed at that direction. So it's not that only these teachings of Buddha are not permeating the Western. There, as I've shown you, some of the prominent psychologists, psychotherapists. There's another famous psychologist, which is Eric Fromm. You must have heard about him, I'm sure. So this is notion of self and well-being. What does he say? Well-being is possible to the degree to which one has overcome one's narcissism. Narcissism means self-love. To the degree to which one is open, responsive, sensitive, awake, empty. Empty means what? Empty of ego. Well-being means finally to drop one's ego. He's a Western psychologist, understanding. A person who can investigate the human behavior at depth and to give up greed, to cease chasing after the preservation and aggrandizement of the ego, to be and to experience oneself in act of being, not in having, preserving, coveting, using. We presently live in having. You want to have things, this. Reserve them, covet them. What does drop one's ego means? Give up delusion. Give up greed means give up the mental factor of alobha. Drop one's ego means mental factor of amoha. Cease chasing after preservation. Preservation means that fear of losing and aggrandizement of ego. So it is the aversive tendency. So essentially all that he is saying is that if you give up greed, hatred and delusion, that is the highest level of well-being. That's exactly what Buddha teaches. This is what whole last 2 months we have been laboring on in various ways. So essentially it means dispelling the delusion of abiding selves leads to the acme of well-being. And this is what Buddha calls it, complete cessation of all dukkha for all times to come. And when he's talking of complete cessation, he's not talking only of temporary putting it aside. It's complete cessation in the light of investigation and development of wisdom. But of course, Buddha realized it's a Herculean task. It's not easy. So he also talks of lesser happiness or mental well-being in the gradations of mental well-being. So what is the first level of well-being? There are 4 levels he identified. First is the worldly happiness. So he calls of happiness in gradations of happiness. So I'll come to this last slide again. First is worldly happiness, which means virtuous living, following the precepts. In fact, worldly happiness also he further subdivides. I have not written here. There's a famous discourse where he says, first level of worldly happiness is to earn money righteously by the sweat of one's brow. The kind of sentence phrases which we have always been used to in our tradition. So the first level of well-being arises when we righteously earn wealth, working hard, and you earn money and develop wealth. And then use it for your own happiness. Second level is use it for your own happiness, not earn wealth and keep it inside, dug a hole and keep it inside for future. Use it for your happiness and well-being of your family, parents, children, society. And when you use the wealth, use it in ample, proper measure so that you don't enter in debt. So the next level of happiness in worldly happiness is debtlessness, being free from debt. These days, we're all caught, most of people are caught, especially in Western societies, in perpetual debt. So the first level happiness, earning wealth. Second level happiness, using it wisely for your own happiness and for happiness of others. Third level, debtlessness. Fourth level, virtuous living. He calls it blamelessness, being free from blame. Blame from your own self. If I live an unvirtuous life, if I earn my livelihood by stealing, I will keep on having fear. I will not be happy. That will not promote well-being. Simple. If I do sexual misconduct, it will make me unhappy. It won't be improve my well-being. Very simple thing. Very simple way of understanding. So that's why those 5 precepts which we mentioned for householders. So that is that all these are worldly happiness. And there's a gradation. You should develop all of them. But then you would say, there's a limitation of that. Well, it is impermanent. That's its nature. And it is dependent on conditions which are not in your control. So why not rise above it and develop happiness which is to some extent in our control? Not fully, at least to some extent. Much so that your dependence on external world is reduced. And that is the second level of happiness, which he calls unworldly happiness, which is obtained from meditative attainments, like practicing deep meditation, what are called jhanas, absorption of the mind in certain objects, breath, or various kinds of objects have been developed. 40 different kinds of objects are developed. There, the dependence on the world is much lesser. It's all your mental process, your training of the mind so that you can enter into absorption any moment. When the situation in the world is very difficult and you're not able to take a decision, enter into the mind, calm it down, so that mind becomes peaceful, and then you are able to take a decision. So obviously, in the process of calming down, it's entirely up to your training. You're not dependent on external world. So that is the second level of happiness, unworldly happiness. And then the third level he calls this the still greater unworldly happiness, for want of a better word, but it is actually the transcendental happiness, the happiness which arises from purity of the mind, by freedom from lobha, dosa, and moha. When you see through the nature of reality completely, then you are completely free from any external influence. The world is not able to harm you. It cannot unsettle you. You have what's called unshakable happiness. These first 2 levels are shakeable. First is extremely shakeable, second is mildly shakeable, and third is unshakable happiness, because there is nothing which binds you to the world. Whether the world situation is pleasant, unpleasant, doesn't matter. Because you've seen through that they are impermanent. They're not having any essence. Something which doesn't have essence, if I truly know it, then it won't matter to me. So you can see a practical approach for most householders. Start from worldly happiness. You could call it a healthy sense of self. Okay? You develop a healthy sense of self. This is what modern psychology wants us to do. But it stops there. It says, no, that's not enough. That's all impermanent. Even if you have the best possible family, extremely good spouse, very obedient children, very obedient parents, whatever you want to, whatever best you can think of, even if you get everything best, by its very nature, it is impermanent. It will change. Nothing is permanent. It will change and we will suffer. So move beyond the conditionality of the world to lesser conditionality and ultimately unconditionality. This is extremely conditioned, partially conditioned, unconditioned. Once you have come to a state of freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion, then we have an experience of unconditioned existence, which is not conditioned by surroundings. That's called unconditioned experience of unconditioned. In a psychological sense, it's called nibbana or nirvana. One is completely free in the true sense of the term. Okay. So we'll stop here. Any questions you can ask me. Yes, any questions?
Sir, for the first level worldly happiness, there were 5 precepts that you listed. I think I got hold of 4. Earning well righteously.
These precepts are not that. Precepts are referring to the Shila which we talked of in the Eightfold Path.
Acha. Okay.
Those the 4 grades of virtuous living were 4 grades were: first, earning wealth righteously; second, using it for your own happy welfare and use the happy welfare of your society, welfare of your family; third, debtlessness; fourth, blamelessness, blameless conduct, blameless life. Their blameless conduct means living by the 5 rules of absence, the free of refraining from violence, refraining from stealing, refraining from sexual misconduct, refraining from intoxication, refraining from telling lies. Okay?
Okay, so yes.
That's why I said Sheila. Sheila means Sheel ka palan karna, 5 Sheelon ka palan karna. That makes it easier, isn't it? At least worldly happiness we can move, then we can think of other. But once you realize its limitation, then there is still a motivation. Okay, let's go further and not get caught in the worldly happiness paradigm only. 1 crore is not enough, 10 is not enough, 100 is not enough, 1,000 is not enough, 100,000, and you keep on doing that. He's not saying don't earn wealth. He's not asking householders to become renunciants. He's saying earn it righteously, fine, and use it for the betterment of your own life and others, people in the society. And don't be wasteful. Don't get so much indulgent in sensory pleasures that you enter into debts. And always remain within the restraint of Shila, restraint of moral and ethical precepts. That will give you the joy of blameless conduct. And at some places, says that will lead you to birth in higher realms, in the heavenly realms. So if you're happy with that, fine, go ahead. Okay. Anything else you'd like to ask?
Sir, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sir, as we talked about that, the delusion of I. So, sir, with respect to that, sir, as we know that it is required for the aspect of convention, it is there. But sir, like if we want to deconstruct the I think or the delusion of I, so how can we slowly like start in our daily life? How can we begin? Or like is there any moderation in this process?
Well, that's what the whole Eightfold Path was meant for. Eightfold Path is a systematic, graduated path of doing that. You first follow the precepts, so that you lead a happy, virtuous life. You have a healthy sense of self, because with an unhealthy sense of self, everything is forgotten, no issue. So you develop a healthy sense of self. You have good idea about yourself, that I am a virtuous person. I do good things. I do help society. I earn money righteously. But then you recognize this is impermanent. That's why we remember I'm going to age. I'm going to fall ill. I'm going to die. I'm going to get separated from my near and dear ones. It's not a kind of doomsday kind of thinking. It's hard, realistic thinking. It's going to happen. So this kind of thinking makes you go beyond the sensory happiness. So is there something beyond? Yeah, try it out. Develop right thinking, develop right effort so as to purify the mind, be more mindful, develop concentration so that you can get experience of meditative happiness. So you get meditative happiness, which is much more lasting than the other. Then you realize that even meditative happiness is impermanent. It also goes away. Okay, there something better? Yeah, there is. And all of us want career improvement. So there's also career improvement. Why not? There's a happiness improvement. So you try to see, yeah, this meditative happiness. Yeah, I worked on it. I get good feelings when I meditate, but it's also impermanent. I can't be constantly in that bliss of meditation. I have to eat also. I have to work also. I have to go to my office also. And there, I then, if I get attached to meditative attainment, I'll start getting craving all the moment. Office जाना पड़ रहा है यार, कहाँ फंस गया, ध्यान कर लेता. Then you got it. You got into my even worse situation. So then you say, there is something higher than that. Oh, this real problem is the root unwholesome tendencies of greed, hatred, and delusion. So let me work on removing them. In the process of leading virtuous life, in the process of meditative attainment, I already have the tools to do that. Then I work on samadhi. I see what is the right view. I change my view slowly and slowly. In the process, my view will automatically change. Once I self-restraint, once I give up unwholesome actions, once I give up stealing, give up violence, give up sexual misconduct, give up telling lies, slowly and slowly, I'll become more and more open to the higher things. And that's how the cycle works. You remember the Eightfold Path we had discussed. This spiral works like that. So you start from precepts, you start from right livelihood. That's the right livelihood, basically. Start from right livelihood, go round and round and round. You will keep on developing bigger and bigger insights, deeper and deeper insights, and then you'll understand, oh, this delusion of I is the real problem. So it's just, that's why it is said, Dhamma Chakka Pavatta. You fall into the cycle of Dhamma rather than the cycle of Sansara. If you remain within the cycle of Sansara, there is no end to it. You keep on getting infinitely sorrows and joys and sorrows and joys and keep on doing it. But if you want to go freedom, then you have to move from this cycle to the other cycle. The cycle of Dhamma, the wheel of Dhamma, you have to follow that. Wheel of Eightfold Path. Follow it, follow it, follow it. Slowly and gradually, the defilements will be removed. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. Any other question?
No, sir.
Okay, so let's now sit quietly for a few minutes and do some sharing of merits. Sukhiyatanang pariharam. May I be free from animosity. May I be free from ill will. May I be free from anxiety. May I be able to take care of myself happily. Mami mata pitu acharya cha jnati mitta cha sa brahmacharya cha kavirantu karapanjavantu kanigavantu Sukhiyatanang pariharantu. May my parents, teachers, relatives and friends, and fellow students be free from animosity, free from ill will, free from anxiety. May they all be able to take care of themselves happily. Sambe satta aviravantu avirapanjavantu anivavantu Sakriyatanam pariharantu. May all beings be free from animosity, be free from ill will, free from anxiety. May they all be able to take care of themselves happily. Dukkhamachanti. May all sufferings evaporate. May all beings be free from sufferings. Yatha nadha sampattito ma vingachantu. May all beings not be separated from their good fortune. Kammasya kammadayada kammayoni kammabandhu kammatadisarnam yam kammam karissanti kalyanam apapapangva tassadayada bhavissanti. All beings are the owners of their karma, inheritors of their karma. They are born from their karma. Karma is their only friend. Karma is their only refuge. Whatever karma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they reap the fruits of those karma. Words. This is how we do what are called 4 divine abidings, remembering 4 good qualities. of loving kindness towards all, compassion towards all those who are suffering, being happy with those who are happy, not having any jealousy for them, and in all situations remaining equanimous by remembering the law of karma. So these are the 4 abidings of divine people which we practice and inculcate. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And stop now.
Thank